Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë is one of the most powerful and emotional novels in English literature. Published in 1847, this novel tells the life story of a young orphan girl named Jane Eyre who faces cruelty, loneliness, poverty, love, betrayal, and finally self-respect and happiness. The novel is written in the first person, which means Jane herself tells her life story. Because of this, readers feel very close to her thoughts, feelings, and struggles. The story is not just a romance. It is also about independence, morality, social class, religion, and the strength of a woman's character in a society that limits women's freedom. The novel is divided into 5 main stages of Jane's life: Gateshead, Lowood School, Thornfield Hall, Moor House, and Ferndean. Each stage represents her growth from a helpless child into a confident and independent woman. The story begins at Gateshead Hall, where young Jane lives with her cruel aunt, Mrs. Reed, after the death of her parents. Jane is only 10 years old at the beginning of the story. She is treated very badly by her aunt and cousins, especially John Reed, who bullies her physically and emotionally. Jane is different from her cousins because she is poor and not beautiful according to society's standards. She is often reminded that she is dependent on their charity. One day, after John hits her, Jane fights back in anger. Instead of understanding her pain, Mrs. Reed punishes Jane by locking her in the Red Room, a cold and frightening room where her uncle died. This traumatic experience deeply affects Jane. She feels fear, injustice, and loneliness. In the Red Room, she realizes that she has no real love or protection in this house. This moment is important because it shows Jane's strong sense of justice and self-respect even as a child. She refuses to accept unfair treatment quietly. Because Mrs. Reed finds Jane difficult to control, she decides to send her to Lowood School, a charity school for poor girls. Lowood is run by a harsh and hypocritical man named Mr. Brocklehurst. At school, Jane faces even more suffering. The food is bad, the rooms are cold, and the girls are treated strictly. Mr. Brocklehurst believes that poor girls should live in hardship to become humble and religious. He publicly humiliates Jane by calling her a liar in front of the entire school because Mrs. Reed has lied about her character. This moment is painful, but Jane again shows inner strength. At Lowood, she meets 2 important people, Helen Burns and Miss Temple. Helen Burns is gentle, patient, and deeply religious. She teaches Jane about forgiveness and endurance. However, Jane struggles to accept Helen's belief that one should silently accept injustice. Helen later dies of tuberculosis, which was common in such poor schools at the time. Her death is very emotional and teaches Jane about the reality of suffering and faith. Miss Temple, the kind superintendent, proves that not all authority figures are cruel. She clears Jane's name and treats her with respect and affection. After several years as a student and then 2 years as a teacher at Lowood, Jane decides she wants more from life. She wants independence and new experiences. Jane advertises for a job and becomes a governess at Thornfield Hall. There, she teaches a young French girl named Adele. Thornfield is owned by the mysterious and brooding Mr. Edward Rochester. Jane meets him in an unusual way when his horse slips on ice, and she helps him. Their relationship grows slowly. Rochester is not handsome in a traditional way, but he is intelligent and passionate. He is impressed by Jane's honesty and strong character. Unlike other women of that time, Jane speaks to him as an equal. She does not flatter him or behave foolishly. Their conversations are deep and meaningful. Rochester tests Jane's feelings by pretending to show interest in a beautiful but proud woman named Blanche Ingram. Jane feels jealous and heartbroken, but she hides her emotions because she believes Rochester would never marry a poor governess like her. However, Rochester eventually proposes to Jane, and she accepts. She feels true happiness for the first time in her life. But on their wedding day, a shocking secret is revealed. Rochester is already married. His wife, Bertha Mason, is alive and lives secretly in the attic of Thornfield. She is mentally ill and sometimes violent. Rochester explains that he was tricked into marriage in his youth and has been unhappy ever since. He says he loves Jane and wants to live with her as husband and wife in another country, even though it would not be a legal marriage. Jane is heartbroken. She loves Rochester deeply, but she cannot accept a relationship that goes against her moral principles. This is one of the most important moments in the novel. Jane chooses self-respect and morality over passion. Even though it causes her great pain, she leaves Thornfield in the middle of the night with almost no money. Jane suffers greatly after leaving Thornfield. She has no food, no shelter, and nearly dies from hunger and exhaustion. Finally, she is helped by 3 siblings, St. John Rivers and his sisters Diana and Mary. They give her shelter and kindness. Later, Jane discovers that they are actually her cousins and that she has inherited a large fortune from her uncle. This inheritance changes her life. For the first time, she is financially independent. She shares the money equally with her cousins, showing her generosity and desire for equality. St. John Rivers is a serious and religious man who plans to become a missionary in India. He asks Jane to marry him, not because he loves her, but because he believes she would be a useful partner in his religious mission. Jane respects St. John, but does not love him. She refuses his proposal because she knows that marrying without love would destroy her spirit. Again, Jane chooses independence and emotional truth over duty. Without affection. One night, Jane feels as if she hears Rochester's voice calling her name across the distance. This mysterious moment convinces her to return to Thornfield. When she arrives, she finds that Thornfield Hall has burned down. Bertha Mason set the fire and died in the flames. Rochester tried to save her and lost his sight and one of his hands in the process. He now lives at Ferndean, a remote manor. When Jane reunites with him, their relationship is different. Rochester is no longer powerful and dominant. He is physically weakened and dependent. Jane, on the other hand, is financially independent and emotionally strong. Now they are equals in every way. Jane tells Rochester that she has her own fortune and chooses to marry him freely. Their marriage is based on love, respect, and equality. In the end, Rochester gradually regains some sight, and they live happily together. Jane narrates the story from a place of peace and fulfillment. The novel explores many important themes. One major theme is independence. Jane constantly seeks freedom, emotional, financial, and moral freedom. She refuses to become someone's servant in love or life. Another theme is social class. Jane is poor and plain, but she proves that true worth comes from character, not wealth or beauty. Religion is also an important theme. Through characters like Helen Burns and St. John Rivers, the novel shows different forms of Christianity, one based on forgiveness and love, and another based on duty and sacrifice. Love in the novel is not simple or romantic in a fairy tale way. It must be balanced with self-respect and morality. Jane Eyre is also considered an early feminist novel. At a time when women had very few rights, Jane demands equality in love and life. She says that women feel just as deeply as men and deserve opportunities and respect. Her famous statement that she is a free human being with an independent will shows her strong personality. Charlotte Brontë created a heroine who was not traditionally beautiful or rich, but was powerful because of her intelligence and integrity. The Gothic elements in the novel add mystery and tension. Thornfield Hall, the strange laughter in the night, the hidden attic, and the fire all create a dark and dramatic atmosphere. These elements reflect the emotional storms inside the characters. Bertha Mason can also be seen as a symbol of suppressed anger and madness, representing what could happen to women who are trapped and powerless. In conclusion, Jane Eyre is a story of growth, strength, love, and moral courage. From an abused orphan to a confident woman, Jane's journey inspires readers even today. She teaches that true love must respect equality, that self-respect is more important than passion, and that inner strength can overcome even the hardest struggles. Charlotte Bronté's masterpiece remains timeless because it speaks about universal human emotions, loneliness, hope, injustice, and the desire to belong. Jane's voice, honest and passionate, continues to touch hearts around the world, making this novel one of the greatest classics in English literature.